Hey guys, how you doing? So Dan from Trading with Dan here. So today we're gonna have a look at this article by Peter Hitchens, released late last night, in the Mail Online. So I mean, a lot of you guys are probably in quarantine as well. The mainstream media has done a great job in creating a climate of fear. And then obviously making people very accepting of the draconian measures that are pretty much, a lot of them are illegal as well, that has been basically imposed on us all. So you guys probably know that I subscribe to the Austrian School of Economics, so I believe in like free markets, in as little smaller government as possible, no intervention, no regulation, everything. The market if it isn't intervened with, will find basically the right place for it to be and how it should function. Also, I'm a libertarian, which ties in with Austrian School of Economics. I believe in people's liberty is paramount, and people should be able to make their own decisions without intervention, and then the free markets will prevail. So here we go. Peter Hitchens: there is powerful evidence this great panic is foolish, yet our freedom is still broken and our economy crippled. So, as I watched the Prime Minister order mass house arrests on Monday night, I felt revulsion, anger and grief, as anybody brought up with this when this was a free and well-governed country would. I feel terribly alone. You could not have known from anything broadcast that night or printed in the following day that anybody wasn't happy with these events, but they were. So this is what I mean about how it's pretty much getting covered up, like the opposition, by the mainstream media. It's good to see articles like this are starting to come out now, obviously in the Daily Mail, which is mainstream media. So above all things this week, I would like to thank all the kind, perplexed people who have got in touch with me, and it means a lot, and to share their doubts with the government's handling of the virus also. There are in fact many of us. If you feel this way, then you are nothing like as solitary as you might think. Next, I would like to thank all of those who disagree with me, who choose to abuse me, often with lies, personal smears and swear words. Your childish, intolerant reaction has strengthened me in my conviction that mine is a better case. If your policy is so good, why can you not define it like a civilized adult? Do you really think that I regret needless deaths any less than you? Can you not accept that I also have good motives? I now suggest this dark season might get worse still before we see the clear, calm light and reason again. The greater the mistake we have made, the less willing we are to admit or correct it. This is why I greatly fear worse developments in the coming days. So yeah, this is where I think the government is as well. They've made big mistakes, and they're definitely not going to admit they've made mistakes. And then obviously trying to correct those mistakes is basically tacitly admitting they've made mistakes. So I feel like they're, to use the expression, digging themselves into a hole. While I predicted roadblocks in my column 2 weeks ago, which I did, I did so out of the instinct that we were entering the craziest period of our lives since the death of Princess Diana, and now there are such roadblocks, officious, embarrassing blots on our national reputation. Yeah, I mean, I remember the death of Princess Diana. I was only young, but I mean, it wasn't that crazy. You know what I mean? There's nothing on the same level as this. I mean, we weren't basically confined to our house and not allowed to go out or go near people. I mean, if this is it's not even a comparison. But anyway, but even I would not have dared to predict the mass house arrests under which we are now confined. I have found the origin of this bizarre Napoleonic decree, a few clauses in the Public Health and Control Disease Act 1984, which I confess I never actually heard of. It just goes to show how careful you have to be with the wording of the laws you pass. If the TV this weekend is full of pictures of people sunning themselves at city parks or escaping to the high hills, there will be plenty of zealots and politicians ready to call for yet more restrictions, subjecting all of us to collective punishment. Perhaps we will emulate the French or Italian states that have returned to their despotic origins and reduced their populations to a sort of cowering serfdom, barely able to step out into the streets. I wonder whether there might also be restrictions on what can be said and published. I can see no necessary bar to this in the law involved. So yeah, I mean, that's probably going to come. It probably is getting enforced in a way, which is why we're only seeing a one-sided view of everything. So anyway, so Section 45C, 3C of the Public Health and Control of Disease Act 1984 is the bit that does this. Once the Health Secretary believes there is a threat to public health, he has or claims to have limitless power to do what he likes, imposing or enabling the imposition of restrictions or requirements on or in relation to persons, things, premises in the event of or in the response to a threat to public health. The former Supreme Court Judge Lord Sumption doubts whether the Act can be used in this way and warns there is a difference between law and official instructions. It is a difference between democracy and a police state. Liberty and rule of law are surely worth something, even in the face of a pandemic. Lord Sumption is generally a liberal hero, and he was invited to deliver last year's BTC Reef lectures, but the human rights crowd have all melted away in the face of this outrage. So his warnings were buried on page 54 of the Times on Thursday, and Parliament, already subpoenaed, has slunk away from its craven acceptance of new attacks on liberty on Monday. Even if it meets again, it will be a poor, neutralised thing. One day it may come to be called the dummy Parliament. Where is the Supreme Court when you need it? Come to that. So do not be surprised by anything. After last week, can we rule anything out? This new Stasi society has a horrifying level of support. Humberside Police are already advertising a portal for citizens to inform on their neighbours for breaking social distancing rules. If you think that won't get any takers, think again. Northamptonshire Police have revealed that their control room has had dozens and dozens of calls about people ignoring the order. They said they're getting calls from people who say, I think my neighbour's gone out for a second run, I want you to come and arrest them. This is basically disgusting, guys. this country as a whole should hang its head in shame. Yeah, I mean, you get these sorts of neighbours. I've got neighbours like this who incidentally are old. So these are the guys that if the young people are managing to get fear instilled in them, just think what the old people are thinking. I mean, these guys are going to snitch on everybody and everything, just people they just don't like. This is what neighbours do anyway. Bad neighbours, basically. So anyway, yeah. So most people will by now have viewed the online film of the Metropolitan Police officers bellowing officiously at sunbathers on Shepherd's Bush Green in London, energetically stamping out the foul crime of lying on the grass. They would have paid so much attention 2 weeks ago to a gaggling louts making unpleasant noises, or to marijuana smokers. Would they have done that to them, is what they're saying, 2 weeks ago. Others will have seen the films taken by Derbyshire police drones of lonely walkers on the remote empty hills, publicly pillaring them for not obeying the regulations. It is genuinely hard to see what damage these walkers have done. I mean, again, this is disgusting, guys. This is disgusting too. The fact we're letting this happen as a nation, it's just disgusting. Like, we can't have police drones flying around the open countryside just because people are walking dogs miles away from anybody anywhere. And yeah, it's just ridiculous. But as a former resident of the USSR, I can tell you that this sort of endless meddling by petty authorities in the details of life, reinforced by narcs, is normal in unfree societies such as we have now become for an indefinite period. This is, by the way, also the seedbed for corruption. Meanwhile, the economy is still crippled, and the overpraised Chancellor Rishi Sunak, like some beaming Dr. Feelgood with cases full of dodgy stimulus, seeks to soothe the pain with huge injections of funny money. I mean, the guy's only overpraised because he's just giving people money, and that's just people are idiots, and they're obviously desperate at the moment because they're not allowed out of the house or to go to work. So whoever, just, you're not going to bite the hand that feeds you, so they're not really going to look at the bigger picture and just look at the money that he's giving to people, that he's basically authorising the government to give to people. He will get this back from us as soon as we are allowed out again. You just wait till you get the bill in increased taxes, inflation and devastated savings. It ought not to be so. In fact, several powerful pieces of evidence have come to light suggesting that the Great Panic is foolish and wrong. I shall come to these to underline the fact that it is not I alone who have these doubts. I do not claim to be an expert, but I refer to those who definitely are experts, whose doubt the wisdom of what we are doing. It is sad that far too little is being reported as prominently as it should be by our supposedly diverse and free media, especially the BBC, which has largely closed its mind and its airwaves to dissent. It is quite funny that a statue of George Orwell stands outside the entrance to the BBC, bearing the inscription, "If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they don't want to hear." Obviously, it should be taken down, as nobody inside the building appears to believe that. Crucially, those who began by claiming we face 500,000 deaths from the virus in this country have now greatly lowered their estimate. Professor Neil Ferguson, who was one of those largely responsible for the original panic, he has twice revised his terrifying prophecy. First to fewer than 20,000, and then on Friday to 5,700. So he was saying 500,000, guys. Then he reduced it to 20,000. You still have the health secretary saying that we'll be lucky if we get less than 20,000. And then on Friday, he's now revised it to 5,700. But I would guess none of you guys have heard about that in the mainstream media, the news. So he says intensive care units would probably cope, and he conceded a point made by critics of the panic policy that if two-thirds of the people who die from coronavirus in the next 9 months would most likely have died this year from other causes. Right, just think about that, guys. Just think about that. He tried to claim that the shutdown of the country had led to this violent backtrack, claiming it was the social distancing strategies which had brought about this amazing climb down. How could he possibly have known either that this would have happened, or that it would happen, or that there was any connection between the two? It is hard to see by what means he could have known any of these things. Could he have softened his stance because of the publications earlier last week of a rival view from the distinguished scientists at Oxford University, led by Sunitra Gupta, Professor of Theoretical Epidemiology? It suggested that fewer than 1 in 1,000 of those infected with the COVID-19 became ill enough to need hospital treatment. The vast majority developed very mild symptoms or none at all. Millions may already have it. This report is being unfairly sneered at by government toadies, but we shall see. It seems unlikely that Oxford University would have bungled their work. And it is obvious that a few days of raggedly enforced house arrests could not have made such a real difference. Even those who believe in these shutdowns think that it takes 2 weeks to have any actual effect. It is fascinating looking at the different countries that have adopted different methods of dealing with the virus to just see how little of a pattern there is. It is very hard to link outcome clearly with policy. Even Hong Kong and Singapore, similar city-states which had similar outcomes, adopted different policies. We might do well not to assume that things work just because we favour them. It is more likely the panic mongers have got their way by spreading alarm and frightening the Prime Minister, and are now trying to get us to forget how ludicrous their original claims were. But first, let me issue another warning. If government do decide to release us from our mass arrests, they will say, as Professor Ferguson is doing, that this is because their repressive economy-wrecking measures worked. We must demand proof, and after a thorough independent inquiry, if that is true, for if it is not, I am very much suspect, then we are in endless danger. Any government using the same pretext could reportedly put us through this misery, impoverishment and confinement. In the end, like the peoples of other despotisms, we should be grateful to be allowed out at all. As things stand, the Johnson government is like a doctor confronted with a patient suffering from pneumonia. This is serious, the doctor says. I've never seen anything like this. Unless we act radically, you will die terribly. He then proposes a treatment that by amputating the patient's left leg, saying this method was used successfully in China. The trustworthy patient agrees. The patient eventually recovers from pneumonia, as he would have done anyway. Then the doctor proclaims that his treatment, though undoubtedly painful and radical, was a great success, but the patient now has only one leg, a very large hospital bill which he cannot afford to pay. I mean, that's a good analogy for what is going on. When I argue against this folly, I am accused of not caring about the deaths of the old. I am old. It is false. I care as much about the deaths of others as anybody. But as a result of taking my stand, I've received private support from people inside the NHS seriously disturbed by what is going on. Now, if you want a scientist who does not support government policy, the most impressive of those is Professor Sukrit Bhakdi. If you desire an expert, he is one. He is an infectious medicine specialist, one of the most highly cited medical research scientists in Germany, who heads the Institute for Medical Microbiology at Johannes Gutenberg University of Mainz, and is one of Germany's most distinguished seats of learning. In recent interviews, he has many uncomplimentary things to say about the shutdown policy being pursued by so many countries. There's a link above. But perhaps most powerfully was his reply to suggestions that the close down of society would save lives. He argued to the contrary, saying the policy was grotesque, absurd and very dangerous. He warned our elderly citizens have every right to make efforts not to belong to the 2,200 who daily embarked on their last journey. Social contacts and social events, theatre, music, travel, holiday, recreation, sports and hobbies all help to prolong their stay on the earth. The life expectancy of millions is being shortened. He also gave this warning: the horrifying impact of the world economy threatens the existence of countless people. The consequences for medical care are profound. Already services to patients who are in need are reduced, operations are cancelled, practices are empty, hospital personnel are dwindling. All this will impact profoundly on our whole society. I can only say that all these measures are leading to a self-destruction and collective suicide because of nothing but spook. This is plainly true. Old people who are still healthy thanks to regular exercise and busy social lives will suffer hugely from being trapped in their homes. But there is another major problem with the government's case. Do the figures show what they claim? Many people will die from the virus, but this does not mean they died of it. Many people die with the virus, but that does not mean they died of it. This is already a major problem in judging death totals from countries such as Italy, yet new rules in the UK mean deaths, which may well be mainly from other causes, are recorded as corona deaths. John Lee, a recent retired professor of pathology and a former NHS consultant and pathologist, writes in The Spectator this weekend, by making COVID-19 a notifiable disease, the authorities may have distorted the figures. In the current climate, anybody who tests positive for it will certainly be known to clinical staff looking after them. If any of these patients dies, the staff will record the virus designated on their as the reason for their death, contrary to usual practices for most infections of this kind. There is a big difference between the virus causing death and the virus being found in someone who died of other causes. Making the virus notifiable may give the appearance of it causing an increasing number of deaths. Whether this is true or not, it might appear far more of a killer than flu, simply because of the way the deaths are recorded. This of course explains why an overwhelming number of COVID deaths here and abroad involved so-called underlying conditions, a fact in fact serious, often fatal diseases. Take this into account when you hear official figures of the virus deaths. Dr. Lee adds, equally critically, we risk being convinced that we have averted something that was never really going to be as severe as we feared. That is the heart of it. If we never go to being as bad, it was never going to get as bad as the panic mongers said. The hysterical measures taken may well not have done any good, yet our freedom is still bruised and broken, and the economy is limping and deeply damaged. If we do not learn the right lessons from this grim episode, then we will for certain have to go through it all again. So yeah, that pretty much reflects all my views, guys. It's good to see someone write it so succinctly with obviously the evidence from other experts. So it is clearly being blown out of proportion. The deaths from this are clearly being inflated, and the measures that are taken are basically a massive overreaction. And no one can claim reasonably that they're not. It is just ridiculous. You cannot shut down a whole economy and then all the problems, all the issues associated with that going forwards. Just even with the healthcare system as it is. I mean, if the economy gets damaged, I mean, there's no money for the healthcare system anyway. I mean, they just think they can keep printing money to cover basically the costs, and that won't work basically. So anyway, so thanks for listening, guys. Remember, this is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. This definitely wasn't financial advice. It wasn't even anything financial. But yeah, so thanks for listening, guys, and I'll speak to you guys soon.